Welcome everyone to TransParents, another week. And sorry, we're just a couple of seconds behind. I had rolled in a little bit late and told Jenny I had literally just finished Will and Harper again because I had watched it, but I wanted to rewatch it so it was fresh. And I was taking notes, and so I kept pausing it. And I was like, I'm gonna have to go. So like, I kind of flew into studio last minute. So welcome. My name is Amber. My pronouns are she, her. You can find me at TikTok at Moonchild77. And this is my beautiful co-host, who I'll introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jenny. My pronouns are also she, her. And you can find me on TikTok and Blue Sky at TransLovingMama.
Woohoo! So this week we decided to discuss the Will and Harper documentary. And we had actually, I had mentioned this, last March, or February when I heard about it. And it took a while before, like, I knew Netflix had bought the rights of it, but Netflix didn't put anything out for quite a while. And then finally they did. I feel like it was released in September. And I've got some friends out in California, and I had been trying to get up with back channel teams in every way possible to see if there was the slightest chance we could get somebody on involved with the film, whether it be Will, whether it be Harper, whether it be team production, marketing, whoever. And yeah, that didn't happen. So we decided that we were I'd heard about it again and was like, hey, Jenny, let's go ahead and do the documentary. And Will, Harper, if you ever see this and you want to come on, please reach out. We'll be more than happy to bring you back and talk about it. Seriously. Dr. Diana, good evening. Great to see you. So yeah, Jenny, I guess I'll play the trailer in a second because I am going to play the trailer for everybody. It's also available in the comments if you want to check that out. But I guess what were your initial thoughts when you heard that Will Ferrell was going to come out, or when I talked to you about this movie, right? About this documentary about him coming out with his friend. What were your thoughts on that?
I was super excited about it. I think that, that he used his privilege in order to do this. I think is really great. Obviously, I thought I was excited about it. I was really excited about it.
You never know what you're going to get from Will Ferrell.
Right.
Like his comedy, and because I was used to his comedy, I was a little, I wouldn't say worried, but I was just kind of like, how is this gonna go? How is this gonna go? And I thought it was beautifully done. AP, welcome. Hi, thank you for joining us. And let me read y'all a little brief bio before we actually play the trailer. So, Will and Harper follows the journey of Will Ferrell and his longtime friend, Harper Steele, a trans woman, as they embark on a 17-day road trip across the United States. The documentary explores Harper's transition and the evolving dynamics of their friendship, highlighting the challenges and triumphs faced by the trans community. The film, directed by Josh Greenbaum, offers a unique perspective on acceptance, identity, and the power of friendship. And I think that was very clear. What came out to me was that they did have a very deep, long friendship, right?
Yeah, they did.
And how to navigate that. And we'll go into like how different people, I guess, responded to it in a minute. But let's do the trailer real quick so that we catch up with everybody. Oh, Jeffrey, welcome. Great to have you. All right. So with that, this is the trailer. And this is available for y'all to watch on Netflix.
Hi there. I'm Will Ferrell, one of the greatest actors in the world. A long time ago, back when I was at Saturday Night Live, I met a guy who was hired as a writer the same week I was hired. He wrote a bunch of sketches for me and eventually became the head writer of SNL. And over the years, he became one of my closest friends. And then one day, I got this email. Hey, Will, something I need you to know. I'll be transitioning to live as a woman.
I don't doubt that Will is my friend, but I'm not Andrew Steele anymore.
It was just, whoa.
I love this country so much, I just don't know if it loves me back right now.
Harper, would you want to do a road trip as this new version of yourself and at the same time figure out what this all means to us?
Do you recognize this guy? This is the Hollywood movie star.
No, you don't reckon? Okay, that's okay. Roll up the window.
Were you a little worried about how to talk to me when I came out to you?
Yeah, probably a little nervous.
There are no ground rules with friends, I'm telling you. I invite any friend of mine to ask me these questions. I am not afraid to talk about them.
Here's a question. Do you think you're a worse driver as a female driver?
That's the dumbest. That's so... No, that is so... Oh, fuck you.
Zing!
But I am.
Woo!
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, yeah. This is my friend Harper.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you, bro.
Hey, not a bro,
She.
though. It's a she, but that's okay.
Sorry.
This is probably around the age where I started to feel just kind of weird.
Yeah.
I used to come out to these kind of places before, and then I transitioned and I got a little afraid. You know what I'm saying? Enjoy it. Come out.
I'm not really afraid of these people. I'm afraid of hating myself. All I want to do is live.
Oh, Dunkin' Donuts.
No.
We've not done one fun thing. Name one fun thing we've done.
Okay. All right. He was really butthurt about that Dunkin' Donuts, let me tell you. Will was.
He eventually
Like,
got the Dunkin' Donuts.
yes, at the very end, because he was like, "Are we really finally gonna do it?" And Harper's like, "Yes, we'll do it," and pulls over. Yeah. So, okay, let me pull up actually my outline because we do the film starts off where we talk about the introduction, and Will Ferrell comes on screen and kind of reads the email that he's gotten from Harper, and you kind of hear both of them
Keep going.
discuss.
I have to get a tissue. I didn't know I was going to feel this way. I just need a second. Sorry.
And at the very beginning, like Will he reads off the email that he's gotten from Harper, and he discusses how this has come. I believe it comes during the pandemic, while they're all going through the pandemic, or at least this is after the pandemic, and so because everybody's kind of not really had the interaction that they've been able to have before because of the way things have been shut down. Harper had decided to transition during this time period, and she's coming out to let her friends know that she's transitioned. And so they agree to meet up in New York. Actually, Will decides, he kind of comes off the cuff, and they're discussing it and how I think he could be of service to Harper. What could he do? And kind of was like, and I think Harper starts to express how she is worried. She traveled a lot her entire life and went to all these like truck stops, diners, dives, if you will. Like in parts of the documentary, she talks about they were like the low bar areas, and she was like, but they're also kind of rougher areas, and she worried now, was she going to be able to go to those same places that had accepted her always before, but now as a trans woman, would they accept her? And Will kind of comes up with this idea, what if we road trip to some of these places and I go with you? So I can get to learn who you are again. We can reestablish this friendship. We can ask questions of one another. And what was really heartbreaking for me, I think, in parts of it was Will expressing how realizing that as comfortable as Harper was as herself, how uncomfortable she had to have been all those years being someone else. That really stuck out to me, that he felt that way. There are a couple of moments where he doesn't actually maybe advocate for her as strongly as he could have, or in context not realizing who they're speaking to kind of correct someone and say, this is my trans friend, in front of someone who might have needed the education. For instance, like the governor of, what was it, Illinois? Holcomb? Is he in, I can't remember what state he is. They meet Governor Holcomb. Illinois. Yeah. So yeah, I guess So yeah, so they have their introduction, and then they just decide, okay, we're going to go start our trip, and they decide to start it in New York, which is where honestly Harper is living at the time, and they go to the SNL studio, and this is the first time that either one of them had been back in a while, but this is the first time since her transition that she's going in and seeing, and she sent emails to everybody. Like, this is how she came out to everybody, including her children. Let me back up. They stop before they go to SNL, and they stop to eat dinner with her kids, or breakfast, I think. And Will is having the conversation because he had known her children all these years, right? Even when they were little. And he's recalling when he met them at first. And they don't remember even meeting him as small as he remembers them. But he starts asking them, like, how did you feel when Harper came out? And they start having the conversation that Harper still goes by the name Pop for them. But it's she, her pronouns. And how one of her children was very worried about her safety as a trans person. And the other child was very worried about their mental stability, their mental health. And I think probably in correlation with navigating the country, navigating the social media, what we hear, the transphobia that's being really forceful right now, which we'll go into a little bit further when they really drop into that conversation. But this conversation with his kids and how they kind of were like, at first it was like when the parents divorced, it was like you might find some dresses, and they were kind of like, okay, it was kind of like tiptoed into them, if you will. So by the time Harper really came out, it seemed like both children were like, okay, this was the obvious next step, right? It didn't seem so shocking to them that I think obviously for Will and probably some of the other castmates on SNL it was. And I loved how his children wanted to be protective of her. Like it just being the opposite, being the parent and having a child come out to me, that's my understanding of it. And I would imagine that if I were an adult raising children, hiding who I was, that would be a difficult conversation to have. And I thought they really kind of encapsulated it beautifully, how well her children had adapted to the situation and were really trying to do what was best for all of them. It wasn't just about Harper. It was also about her children and how they accepted and how they continued the relationship of a parental figure that is now changing gender. And again, I think it gave us a viewpoint into a lens that we don't often see. I think this movie gave us a lot of different lenses that, again, we aren't used to seeing, and asked some important questions. I think sometimes a comedy, and I do know we'll go into the reviews of it. I know that was some of the questions that some people had said that actually watched it, where they were a little concerned that comedy might take away from the seriousness of the topic. Or that like the comedy just kind of like, I know some within the community felt like some things were kind of joked about. But at the same time, I will say that because Harper was a cast writer, and I didn't make that clear enough, guys. Harper and Will Ferrell met on SNL the same week that Will was hired as a cast member. Harper was hired as a writer for the scripts and wrote most of Will's parts. So this is one of the reasons why they bonded so well. But yeah, so I think that comedy thing, you would see them both lean into that because they're both into comedy. And so I think some people within the trans community felt like that might take away some of the seriousness of the conversation. I guess what was your take on that, Jenny?
Obviously, not living as a trans person, I can't perceive it the same way as a trans person. So it didn't come across that way to me. There were a couple times, now that I think about it, where I see what you mean, where it was like the comedy kind of brushed over what should have been more of a conversation, or should have maybe been dug deeper into, and I think would have been really meaningful in the film. But
Right.
Overall, I thought it was, I thought it was well balanced. But again,
for their
I'm like,
relationship,
yeah,
I
there were
think
a
that made
couple,
sense.
yeah, there were just a couple moments where I'm like, Yeah, I can look back and say that. Yeah.
Right. Right. But again, the film does a really good job at the
I
end where
will
Will
tell you
is kind of
this.
talking about. Go
I
ahead.
will tell you this. There's a gal in California who started a documentary on, trans people in red states. I am in that documentary. I don't know if it will ever make it to Netflix. She did start it. And the little gal who was living with me, Hallie, was in it. And so who knows if it'll ever, get out there, but it was pretty cool. And what I will tell you is there's a ton of editing and cutting, a ton that does not ever make it to film. So everything we see is just what they chose to put in.
there.
And so, I have no idea what Will and Harper discussed as far as, hey, do we want this to all be, do we want this whole sentence in there, or do we want this scene in there at all? Or
Right.
what they're what they agreed upon beforehand to even discuss or how to
Right.
frame anything. So I don't know. And we're kind of at the mercy of that. Are you leaving?
We are. And you are talking about two people who work in a comedy
Right.
in industry. So there is a lot of comedy. And I think also we use humor to unpack anxiety.
Right.
So there were a lot of times too where I could see humor might have been used because either
Right.
one or the other was maybe feeling a little self-conscious, might have been feeling, just there's a lot that goes into that. I think Will handled it very gracefully. Will Ferrell is not always my favorite character because his characters that he plays, their humor tends to go too obnoxious for me to take.
I love them.
I
love him,
like,
but I've
some of
also
his roles.
seen so many other great films where he's not just that, goofy
comedian,
comedy guy.
right?
Like
Right.
Stranger Than Fiction is incredible. It's
Right.
one of my favorite movies.
I don't even know that I've seen that one.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's not
I have to
like
look at
it's a
that one.
comedy, but it's kind of borderline, like maybe dark comedy, dramedy. I don't know. It's just something a little different, and I love it. Check it out.
I like when you've got an actor that goes kind of outside of what their
Right.
normal
Right.
scope is. And I'm trying to see here. Okay, so the next time, all right. So then we go through SNL. We kind of meet all SNL, and then they go to DC. And when they go to DC, they start discussing how, because Will at one point is like, Harper, where did Harper come from? Why did they choose Harper? And so they start discussing this on the road, right, on the way to DC. And Harper actually starts talking about her mother had gone to school with the author Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
And
That's cool.
and she loved the name. And so I was like, I could do Harper. I've always loved the name. I'll be Harper. And that just felt, and Will kind of asked, like, how did that make you feel?
Yeah.
And she was like, honestly, it made me feel warm inside. Like,
Yeah.
it made me feel comfortable. It felt comfortable wearing that name. Whereas the other name, their dead name, had never felt comfortable. It always felt like a mask, which we go into more when we go back home. They look at local landmarks. They kind of talk a little bit about the political, not really much, because they're kind of joking at the White House, like, we want to go see, Joe Biden, and Joe Biden's not there, so they obviously don't meet Joe Biden, and they move on. So there's kind of a little bit of joking there. Let's see, talk about traveling cross country. Oh yeah. And so then they were talking about, they start talking about traveling, right? And Harper talks about all these different times that in life that they would cross country, as a man, and they could throw in like 3 t-shirts into a bag and just go. And how now traveling as a woman was much different. And she's talking about like all these shoes I have to cram into a box, but also talking about before people knew, traveling, cross-dressing and dressing as a woman, and traveling the country that way and carrying an extra set of clothes and being anxious and scared about possibly being pulled over by a cop for a traffic stop, or in one of these like lower rural areas, walking into a gas station or to a truck stop in a dress, and how that would be perceived, and definitely knowing that she might need to carry this extra set of clothes for protection. And you could kind of see in a way that Will seemed uncomfortable with that. He didn't like that she had felt afraid, like she needed to carry. And again, this is something that if you haven't ever had to think about this, these are new things. And so I think as a friend, he is listening to her and honestly trying to relate to her experiences and going, oh, that's not something she would have had to have navigated before. Then now she has to. They actually discussed that with the SNL set because Harper talks about that she had like started to go down this alley one night and was like, oh no, this may not be the best choice to go. And of course, one of them jokes, when is it ever, safe to go down a dark alley? But they just made it, she states how much different it is now being a trans woman.
Right. So it's easy to say, oh, well, it's never safe to go down that way. And we do that. We all tend to do that. Well, you should always, watch your interactions with the police. Well, you should always. Yeah, but as a man, I never thought of that. The fact that it only came to me once this had happened, that's the point.
Right.
That's the point. Is no, you can say that. You can say, well, nobody should walk down an alley. Yeah, but it never occurred to me before. So there's something to that.
Well, and I think another piece of this conversation during this part is they're also talking in this section about how she had started going to a therapist about 7 years ago. This is when it started finally coming out for her. And she's trying to express herself to her therapist. And her therapist is defiant. Her therapist says that she's being defiant. Even though Harper is trying her best to express that she feels uncomfortable, that she feels detached, she feels disgusted with herself as a man. And this therapist won't even hear her.
Yeah.
And later, and I'll just tell you that later in the film they discuss it, and she was with that therapist for a full year before she finally found a gender affirming therapist. And she was like, and that changed my world. And we'll go into that conversation in a minute. But so she does eventually find one. But just that when she first came out, the first therapist she went to was just kind of pushing back and telling her no. And who are we to tell anyone how they might feel in their own skin? I don't want anybody telling me how I feel. You have no clue. I don't have any clue how anybody else feels either. So why the hell would I go project my interpretations? I don't know. That was a very, again, that was a hard moment. You could tell that Will was uncomfortable, that he didn't like that she had suffered that. And here is someone who's already in dysphoria. And as a therapist, you push them into more?
Yeah. And how many other people is that happening to? How many other people?
And how many survive it? How many survive it? She did that for a year. I can't imagine. Okay, so then we go to Indiana. We stop in Indiana. We go into a Walmart to pick up some supplies or whatever, and we decide we're going to have like a little conversation in the parking lot. They actually pull over in like parking lots and random truck stops and just on the side of the road anywhere, pop up some like pop-up chairs literally and have a beer. And this happens like 4 or 5 times throughout the movie in just random spots. So this one was in a Walmart parking lot. And Harper and Will express being worried. And Will says that he's afraid he would be hurtful. And honestly, didn't how their relationship would change because they're talking about, before they met up together for the first time. These were some of Will's fears. And then they go into a restaurant and she is misgendered. And Will doesn't like necessarily call it out and correct it immediately. And so afterwards, they're kind of talking about how Will can be a better ally, right? And can help in situations like that. And he's apologizing to Harper for feeling like he failed her in that instance. Now, he actually breaks down later in another section that it gets more uncomfortable. But in this part, he is just kind of like, what do you want me to do? And I think that's important to talk about, that friends, when you're coming out, whether it be friends, whether it be relatives, that not that they feel like they can ask that that person in their life all the questions in the world. Harper was fully open to that. And Harper had expressed that. I want you to ask me, feel free to ask me whatever you want to ask. But I thought it was very authentic of Will to really, again, express that as well, that I want to ask you things, and I'm also afraid that I'm going to say something that hurts you. I'm going to say something that makes you feel like I don't accept you. And so I think in ways it was a very vulnerable. I think because they did know each other so well, they could joke some of these things off that maybe a shorter term relationship would not have been, or just a different type of relationship, like a parental relationship. You and I wouldn't necessarily joke with our kids the way the two of them joked together. But that was the basis. That was the basis. I mean, I joke with my kids, so yeah, and you're funny like me, so I got a feeling you do too. But I just mean their basis, their foundation was this comedy show. So it made sense why they would break into comedy whenever anybody felt anxious or maybe a little vulnerable, if you will. Because I would catch that. I'm like, oh, you're using a joke because you're a little uncomfortable there. To ask the question, but still ask the question. But I did think it was good that the two of them felt like they could kind of par off one another. Trying to think. The Indiana game. Let's go to the Pacers game. So they go to the Pacers game, and this is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out which one. I'm not sure which one is the governor and which one isn't. If they were in Illinois or if they were in Indiana. So I'm sorry, whoever Holcomb's in, I don't mean to insult the wrong state. So during the game, they have a chance to speak to the governor. Governor Holcomb comes over. And of course, everybody has noticed that Will Ferrell is at a game. And so all the reporters are around them. And it kind of starts the conversation off with Harper kind of going, I kind of get, because I'm with Will, who is a celebrity, I'm now being randomly stuck in photos that I didn't necessarily choose to be in. And Will is trying to educate. So while he's been asked to say something at the game because he's a celebrity, and somebody kind of said, oh, you might say something to the governor, he's kind of not thought about that. And the governor comes over on the sidelines and is like, hey, what are you doing in Indiana? Or what are you doing here? And he's kind of like, hey, I'm traveling with my friend Harper, who's just transitioned. And so he's trying to be authentic up front with the governor. And the governor doesn't really have anything to say. You can kind of just see the governor kind of smile and nod his head and walk away. And afterwards, they're kind of talking about who was that? And they're looking up, who is the governor again? What's his name? And they're pulling him up and they're like, oh. And about the time they're seeing that here, his office had just announced that they were banning gender-affirming care for minors. So that you could tell both of them kind of felt slapped in the face. Like that was probably performative. And that really, the governor wanted a moment with Will Ferrell. He was looking to feed off Will's celebrity. Not realizing that he was going to be involved in a trans documentary. So, what were your thoughts on that part?
Well, a couple things. There were a few times when, and again, I have to go back to, I don't know what the agreement was between these two, and I don't know what was cut out. Right. It felt like there were times when Will would announce things or say things about Harper or for Harper. Just first thing, this is my friend, she just transitioned. And I don't know if that was an agreement they had. Right. And I understand the intent. It is to educate, it is to expose, it is to. But sometimes I just don't think that's always how we should lead. That's just me. I'm not gonna, I come on here to talk about parenting a child from a parent's perspective, a trans person. Right. But that's not the first thing I say about my son. If I'm introducing my son to somebody, I would never say, this is my son, he's transitioning. This is my son, he just transitioned. This is my son, he's trans. This is my son. Right. But again, because I understand the point of this thing, it just made
the documentary curious. Maybe that was why they were doing
but it did make me curious how Harper felt about that. because it kind of became this focal point of her, but then maybe that was their point.
Well, I mean, okay, so they
feeling
they
just a
go
little
into
bit
that.
weird.
They go into that.
Right.
So Will admits on the way that he didn't anticipate meeting the governor, and when he told him what they were going to do, or told the governor what they were doing, the governor seemed receptive. He wished he'd been more inquisitive and asked the governor his stance on trans people. Like, it's a discussion afterwards after they
Right.
found out that he's passed his gender affirming ban. And he was like, had I realized that, I would have done more research. It would have been better for me as an ally, as your friend, to have said, so what is your stance on trans people, especially on a documentary like that? Like,
Right,
to call him
right.
out and ask him right there and then, what's your thoughts?
Yeah.
Here's an adult. We haven't groomed them. They weren't a kid groomed. This is an adult in their like early 60s. I think
65.
Yeah.
65 when they went on that trip.
Right. So so that kind of stuck out. And then let's see. Will and Harper discuss how Will gets to take pics with people, sometimes awkward because Harper gets pulled into it, which could give her negative and positive attention. Harper mentions knowing no trans people growing up. So that is the other thing is while they're having this conversation, they're on their way to Illinois to meet a woman, Dana, who's come out as an adult, an older adult, as a trans woman, had always lived in Peoria, Illinois, and lived there. And now they kind of were going in to have that conversation to discuss with her what her transition was like. Dana knew in kindergarten, and so these are just some things from the film. Dana knew in kindergarten, it wasn't about parts, it was how she felt. She would pray every night in grade school, fix me or kill me. Why am I like this? She was very suicidal at times. She began counseling and then started to come out. Harper discusses having a bad experience with her counseling, but then finding a better one. And her first estrogen made her feel brand new. They kind of discuss this euphoria that they both had, finally being able to do some of these gender affirming things for themselves, like feeling at home. And they both then discuss having vocal courses or actually Dana starts talking about having vocal courses because Harper starts talking about how she looks one way, but then the voice comes out and it's something else. And Dana, recognized that and said, that she had started doing vocal courses and that then she really started thinking about it and was like, why am I doing this? This isn't about me. This is for everybody else. And that's when she stopped taking vocal courses and accepted her voice. And Harper didn't really give feedback about whether or not she felt like maybe that would be something she would grow into or not. But I did think that was interesting that Dana finally was kind of like, no, you have to do what's right for you. And I just realized that I was doing that to please other people. That wasn't even about me. I'm good. Let's see. It would have been for everyone else. Yeah. So then Dana and Will and Harper have a karaoke night together, which was awesome. And then on the way to Iowa City, they call Kristen Wiig to come up with a theme song for their trip. That was a funny little conversation. Iowa City. So this is home turf for Harper. And they go to her sister's house. And Eleanor. And Eleanor, Will is opening up, talking about questions to Eleanor about when Harper shared, how did Eleanor feel? And Eleanor talked about how much sorrow she felt for her sister, how stressful it must have been for her sibling. She wanted to respond to her quickly when she reached out by email for reassurance and responded with, good, I always wanted to have a sister, which made Harper feel really, really welcoming. Even if her sister had no idea what to say, that was enough to start with, right? And it wasn't what was said. For Harper, it was the fact that people responded so quickly.
I was gonna say that was kind of the point, and I loved Eleanor's point of like, I didn't want her to think there was any hesitation, that I had to sit and think about this, that no matter what I said and how imperfect it might be, I wanted her to know this was an immediate, cool, great, okay, and I really did love that.
I thought it was beautiful, a beautiful dynamic. And they start going back through pictures and memories, and Harper's pointing out when she started to feel uncomfortable. You saw some of that in the trailer about the age that she started to feel uncomfortable. And she talks about when, in some of the pictures where she's got longer hair, that's when she always felt the most like herself. And then they start talking about hand-me-downs, and Eleanor talks about this pair of white bell bottoms that she had that she had given to to Harper, and Harper had worn it out with the guys to the skate park, and they had gone skating all weekend and had a great time. And when they're leaving, they're all like, when they're leaving the skate park, all the friends are like, yeah, let's do this again next weekend. And oh, yeah, cool. And then someone says, except for the faggy pants. And Harper was like, and so no more bell bottoms. They were gone from that moment. And just talked about how like there were moments that she felt like within herself where Harper was trying to come out, and then something like that would push it right back down.
Yeah.
And that was I teared up on that part. That
Me
part
too. It
seemed
made me
real.
wonder how often that had happened, like in my own child's life, and that I
Right.
wasn't aware of.
Right? Same thing. I could family pictures, felt most like herself, visit family home, got right on a unicycle. She rode a unicycle, and this kid's riding by on a unicycle, and Will's like, hey, can she ride that for a second? And she's like, well, hold on, I'm in heels. I'm not sure this will work. But she got on that unicycle and just pedaled right on like she hadn't been off of it 50 years.
Right.
Would never be able to get on a unicycle, ever. Wouldn't try that. Their next stop is in Meeker, Oklahoma. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this. So on the way, they begin to discuss body changers. And Will asked Harper, did it feel like the heavens singing when she started to the breast, right? And Harper was like kind of joking and said, well, I kind of did puberty in like 4 hours. And again, this is some of that like where they start doing the joking thing. And I don't know if it's the kind of, because there's a little anxiety that somebody might say something wrong. So they kind of go into a comedy. So it's a little more forgiving. Right? Possibly.
I don't know. I didn't perceive that one that way. And trans people are funny people, and they do joke. I joke about like my mental health, and it isn't always because I'm uncomfortable. It's because I've accepted what it is, and I think it's hilarious. I think this is hysterical. Like whatever is in here, like I don't even get it, and so I poke fun of it because I find it absolutely absurd. So sometimes maybe and I don't mean to say that anything about the trans experience is absurd, but I think that even the human experience is seeing the absurdity in some things, and the absurdity of, wait, I went to bed one way, I woke up and I went through puberty. Like what a concept. Like what a time to be alive. Most girls have to go through like years of like waiting for those babies to grow. So to me, that's how I perceived it. There is a kind of wild absurdity to that medical science can do that, and we can go, holy smokes. I think, that's how I perceived it. But the whole Oklahoma trip just pissed me off. I'm gonna be honest.
Why? Because
it's bullshit. It's bullshit that it was going on during Joe Biden's pregnancy. Congratulations, Joe. It was going on during Joe Biden's presidency. And there's all these cameras, and people are aware of that. And you got people being like, well, I mean, I don't know a trans person, but I know somebody who's bi. Bitch, first of all, who isn't bi? Like, are you kidding? You've relegated yourself to one gender. That does not even make sense to me, but probably because I'm queer. But it's all bullshit. Had those cameras not been there, had Will not been there, Harper would not have been safe. I live in this state, and I'm here to tell you, don't try that.
I was going to say, so let me give you the description.
Wherever they were at, I think it was like a chili bowl, because I've been to those little stock car races things. They're all over Oklahoma. I'm sure they're all over a lot of other states too. But the guy who's like, oh no, I mean, don't be scared. If you want to come out, come out. Bullshit. Don't do it. No, that's not
they
safe.
said they were going to Oklahoma. I was just like, oh,
yeah,
I wonder what Danny's going to say about this part.
You could probably get away with it. And like Oklahoma City and Tulsa are more purple areas. They are, metropolitan areas. They've got, much more diversity. But today, you want to go, and now that this is what we're dealing with, I wouldn't fucking do that. That's a terrible idea. You could get unalived. Do not do that. If you are coming to Oklahoma, you need to talk to me, and I will keep you safe, or we will hang out, or I will show you the right places to go. Don't go into some small town dive bar and believe that just because you saw it on fucking Will and Harper, that's how those people are. Mad respect to our natives our native peoples who sang for him and her, God dang it, and welcomed them.
Right.
That's incredible. We know that there's a Two-Spirit community within there.
Two-spirited.
But your basic white Oklahoma person, no.
Okay, so for the audience who's not seen the documentary, this is the setup for the scene that we're talking about. Harper goes in, so they go to it is a dive bar. It looks like you're in the middle of nowhere, bunch of trucks pulled up around a wooden shack, and you walk in, and so they're in the car, and Harper's like, I'm gonna go in alone. And Will's like, are you sure about this? And Harper's like, I wouldn't do this by myself, but because you're here,
right,
I don't know that I would try this any other time. And she wants to try it. And so she puts Will on speed dial. So if she gets in trouble, she can immediately hit the button, and he's outside. So she goes in, wants to try it alone. Harper notices from the get-go there are Confederate, pro-Trump, and anti-Biden signs all over the walls.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel welcoming at first.
You're
She's being
safe.
stared at. She gets a beer. She's kind of leaning up against the wall. You can see people kind of all around the bar. And finally, there are one or two women who do start kind of talking to her and another person, and they're kind of joking at first, and they do kind of say one or two things that are kind of
they're little
slanderish,
but
they're little digs. But then they kind of like, if she corrects them, or they would even like one or two they correct in themselves, like not realizing that they had misgendered her or something. They would immediately correct it. So let's see. So while this is going on, though, you then see a scene go back to Will in the parking lot. Will's gotten out of the car now, is kind of standing in front of the bar because he's a little nervous. He's not heard from Harper. He's a little worried what's going on inside. And you could just see that he really wants to get in and know what's going on.
That his friend is safe, yeah.
Right. So then Harper finally is like, hey, why don't you come in? She's like, my friend's out parking the car, and brings him in because they both know that if Will Ferrell walks into the bar, this is going to change the dynamic, obviously. So, of course, when he does, everybody's like, oh, wow, oh, yeah, it's great. Oh, and they're much more willing to speak to Harper, right? And this is when you talk about the person who says, oh, I know somebody who's bi. Like, oh, we know somebody in the crowd, and oh, this is perfectly acceptable. And one of them misgenders, you saw that in the trailer, one of them misgenders her, and Will and Harper both correct him. And he is happy to correct himself. Like, again, he doesn't do anything shitty. And there are people there. She transitioned about 18 months before this. And there are people there within the bar who are indigenous. And when they learn that she has transitioned, they actually get up and do a tribal welcome
song.
A song of some
I don't know what else to call it. Yeah.
And I think it was to honor her. And they are there is what we call two-spirited within a lot of indigenous populations. And yes, Jenny's right. There is some within the Oklahoma there. We actually, Dennis Baker, who we had on last year, he was part of that tribe and actually had talked about two-spirited as well. And they are revered within indigenous cultures. They are considered almost like shaman. They inhabit both female and male. And they are almost like deities within their culture. So I did think that was beautiful that they did that for her. I do think that was very sincere, whereas I don't necessarily know that all the conversation was, because again, I'm like you, I feel like there were a lot of cameras there, and therefore they got.
And I get it. I mean, it's not like Will or Harper could, you can't change that. You can't, like, this is the documentary. Whatever happens here is what happens here. But for anybody to sit and, pretend like they care, they're nice, or that they see you as a human and then turn around and do what they're doing now. I mean, it just feels so fake to me, and it just disgusts me, to be honest. And that's where I am right now. I'm kind of just in this very disgusted place. So maybe I should be more graceful. With that, I can't read that in Oklahoma. And
I worked with a client in Oklahoma, and on my second visit to the client, someone learned I was an affirmed woman. That was the last time I heard from the client. They will not even respond to my calls or emails.
Yep.
I mean that makes sense.
Here, and I would not trust anybody here. I
see
people every day in and day out who will just act so nice to your face, and just don't mess with them. Right.
I mean, you don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
And So I will say, so when they leave this, Jenny mentioned it, they go to a little race that is also in Indiana, or there in, are we in Indiana? No, we're still in Oklahoma. Sorry. We go to the little race. And when we get done, this is when Will has the breakdown
Right.
because they leave and they're talking about the interactions, and Harper's talking about had she gone, like she, again, what Jenny had said, she mentioned she was afraid to go to the races because she was afraid of that environment where she knew she was accepted before. She was afraid she was not accepted now. And the guy's like, oh, no, come out, enjoy it. And I was kind of like, Jenny, like if I were in North Carolina, you would get this response with a camera, and that's the only reason why you would get
That's
it.
right.
Sorry.
That's right.
Not to be ugly, but that was the reality of it.
Yeah.
And as they're walking back to the parking lot, Will's kind of like, is that what you expected? Like, how's the response? Like, how are you feeling? And she kind of talks about how she's a little in shock, a little dismayed. And it wasn't that she wasn't afraid. She makes the comment, I'm not afraid of those people, but of hating myself. And then she breaks down as they get into the car, and Will tears up with her, realizing how hard this has been, and really just kind of seeing some of that light through the cracks of Harper's shell of how difficult this has been. And again, that fear of how was she going to be accepted in these spaces.
Yeah.
So then we move on to Amarillo, Texas, and they decide they're going to stop at a steakhouse. And there's like this, they see this billboard and it says 72-ounce steak for free. And Will's like, oh, let's go there. And he's like, oh, wait, but we got to eat in an hour. And they decide they're going to go anyway. And Will decides for whatever reason because he's Will Ferrell, to dress up in a Sherlock Holmes costume, which of course gets attention from the very get-go when they get in there.
Right.
And he introduces himself as Sherlock Holmes, and then he's going to eat the steak. And of course, so they have to announce Will Ferrell, well, actually, Sherlock Holmes is going to eat the steak, and they want to know the name and location and the person he's with to kind of set the timer. Here's your hour. And so he says, Miss Harper Steele, and they do Harper Steele, Miss Harper Steele to correct it. But then suddenly you have cameras, and everybody's recording.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like on this heightened table in the middle of the restaurant, and
all eyes on them.
you can tell they both become uncomfortable with it. I think Will is kind of like immediately halfway through kind of realizing this was a bad idea. I should not have A, dressed up in this costume. B, we should not have taken on this challenge. And although they're trying to see how the community will react, how public will react in these situations, I think he really realizes how much danger he could have put Harper in that situation.
Yeah.
That it's a really uncomfortable. And afterwards they discuss it, and Harper talks about how she really felt like she was on display for being trans.
And they show all of the comments and posts and things that are made online, kind of boop, 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 boop,
because
boop,
people are like posting them in the restaurant.
Just hateful. Horrific. And that is exactly what I mean. If that had happened at that little Oklahoma bar, you would have seen the same thing.
Yep.
These people, they're, I think that was such a sweet, maybe an okay time when it was happening, maybe, and like maybe we were a little calmer. I do not know, but just now my blinder. Don't get me wrong, my blinders were already off. But I know so many people who have behaved a certain way in front of me and in front of my son, who then turn around and now are the reason that all these things are happening. And I'm like, nah, I don't trust a single one. And there are wonderful people in Oklahoma. There are wonderful people in Texas. There are wonderful people in every state. But I'm very angry.
You don't know. You just don't know. Let's
don't
see.
trust people.
So the comments are filled with profanities, misgenderings, prejudice, and they discuss with us the next day. Harper's transness was on display and made her feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Saddest part for Will, he broke down and says that he felt like he let Harper down in that moment. He was very upset. He was very worried about her safety, and he just didn't know what to do or to say that would make it better or worse.
Yeah.
And you can see his guilt and his shame for that, for not knowing what to say and do in that moment. And they kind of pull over on the road to, again, sit down with the chairs and the beers to discuss, to look at the comments and talk about it. And Harper talks about how those tweets easily stay in your head.
And that's an adult with skills, with life experience, with resources and options. This is a former writer for SNL.
Yep.
This is not an impover. This is not some child in middle school who doesn't have the tools to get those things out of
Right.
their head.
Right.
Doesn't have the resources to get away, buy a little home in somewhere and escape. It was such a staggering, moment, usually very subtle if I go out in public and want to, I understand that
Where?
this is Dragon Rider. Hey, Sally.
Yes.
This is my girlfriend from TikTok. I'm so thrilled to know you and see you.
Yeah, well, she's coming in from YouTube. Yay! And like I said, like I saw the name pop there because honestly, we have so few YouTube comments that usually pop up in here. I was like, ooh, that's not even LinkedIn. That's another
exciting.
site. Yay! Right?
We're growing.
And I think another part of this conversation they go into whether or not she talked about her safety and about she had looked at getting a gun, and this was before she had transitioned, and about going in and they were like, is this for safety? Is this for like just are you a collector or whatever? And honestly, how it had never really crossed her mind that it needed to be for safety.
Right.
And that then once she transitioned, she was like, I don't want to have to worry about that. I just want to live my life. I don't have to worry about being safe. Can I just be who I am?
Well, I mean, and the gun had a different purpose.
Right.
And really,
right.
I remember there was a time during COVID and my husband was like, well, I'd like for you to have a handgun at the house. And I let him get me a handgun for the house, fully knowing that I was glad I had that gun because I had intentions. And then afterward thinking, that was probably the dumbest move we could have made. The last thing I need in this house is a gun.
Mine was so bad for so many years. Like, yeah, we talked about it because my ex worked on the road for like 10, 15 years of our marriage. And he worried about that being gone weeks at a time. And he was just like, I feel like we should have a gun. And I was just like, no.
Right.
No, I don't trust me. It wasn't just that. I also had one of my children was one of these precocious children who would get into everything. It didn't matter how many locks you put on it, they could get in it. And it was just kind of like, I don't want an accident.
Right. Like I'm
a
less
regrettable
safe
accident
as a woman for having a gun.
Yeah.
It's less safe for me. I'm more likely to lose my life at the end of the barrel of that gun than I am to protect myself with it. Statistically, you know. Of course, I'm glad I have it now for reasons.
Right. So the next part, they go to New Mexico and they meet up with another Saturday night co-host, or not co-host, but I guess actor Will Forte, and they go on a balloon ride, right? And Will Forte tells her how proud he is of her and how it had been a year ago to the day they were going on the balloon flight that he got in the email about her coming out and transitioning, and how much he loved her for being exactly who she was. And then they stop at the Grand Canyon. And at the Grand Canyon, they have a very interesting conversation because at the Grand Canyon, they want to have their picture taken. There's some other tourists there. They find out they're from New York, like Harper, and Will introduce them that they're going on this trip because she's transitioned. Harper has transitioned, and they're going to all these spots that she's gone throughout the country. And one of the tourists then says, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" And Harper's like, "No, go ahead, please." And she's like, "I'm a retired therapist for over 30 years." I don't know if she said therapist or counselor. And she said, "But I had a patient, and this was early in my career, so this would have been like 30 years ago." She's like, "I had a patient who came out to me, and I pushed back on him."
Yeah.
And it was somebody who was married and loved their spouse, but felt a different way, wanted to wear, I think, the spouse's clothing and that kind of thing. And this therapist, and she had been very rude to the patient and had been like, "No, I'm sorry." And admits that to Harper and Will, that she was very closed off, that she didn't know how to handle that. And realized that over the years, it had kind of haunted her what kind of blockade she might have been for that client, and possibly for other clients that she had with her own bias. And so that is something I learned a lot. I feel like with the trans community, with the gender spectrum community is that they tend to like gender affirming therapists, someone within the community who does understand them better, understands honestly the challenges that they have to go through, the bias, the discrimination. It would be really hard to talk to a therapist, in my opinion, who has no clue
Right.
what you're going through. Like how it's very, yeah, it would just be very hard. Like it's already hard trying to imagine yourself because none of us go through the same exact things. But this is something completely out of the box
But
from what
everybody
most of us
wants to
experience.
feel safe and affirmed and validated by their therapist. Like that's the person you're going to work through stuff, and to have anything you say be kind of brushed off, or well, you just shouldn't do that. Don't you love your children? Don't you love your wife?
Right.
Well,
Right.
yeah, but I'm trying to tell you who I am.
Right. And you're not
Right.
listening to me.
But
Um,
but you also have to give that therapist some grace. That's what they were taught
right.
to do. They were taught to
It
help
was.
people get over that. They were
Yep.
taught to help people move past that because the goal was to just be
That exists.
basic. So I mean, you got to give some grace there, but thank goodness she learned and grew.
Right. And I think so. It's like, okay, so we do the balloon ride, we do the Grand Canyon, we go to the hotel pool, and this is the first time swimming in public, and nobody else shows up at the pool, and they're at like I said, they're at their hotel pool, and they just kind of talk about it, and Will kind of ask her like, how does it feel? And she's like, well, everything's good except for the way the suit fits. If the suit fit a little bit better, I might feel great. But right, and I thought that was hilarious. Honestly,
That's
it was an
about the
honest
most
moment.
woman thing I've ever heard.
Right, it was an honest moment. And then they go there. Then they go to Las Vegas, and they're like, "Let's do something different." And so they want to go out, and Will's like, "I'm not going to go dressed up as Sherlock Holmes. I'm like, we're just going to go out for a nice dinner." And so he drops Harper off to do some shopping, and then he goes to do some shopping of his own, and he goes to a costume shop to pretty much cover up. He wants to figure out a way to disguise himself so that people don't see him as Will Ferrell, so that
Right.
they can go out together at this dinner and experience what it really would be like
Yeah.
for him to go out with somebody if he wasn't celebrity, to go out with someone. And they feel like maybe the waiter might have caught on to it, might have been a little suspicious.
Right.
But other than that's about it. It does turn out to be a really good experience.
Cute.
Harper expresses that shopping, she felt much more comfortable going shopping that day, and that even a woman within the store had said something to her and was kind to her, and how much more within her own skin she felt compared to before they had gone on this trip. That had even given her a little bit more confidence to be able to go out shopping on her own. She worries about her makeup, that the better she gets at her makeup, then the more she feels like her masculinity shows, and how to balance that. So again, but I thought that was, and then she kind of starts asking Will, like, so what has been some of yours, and he's like, honestly, like, I'm just kind of slowly replacing Andrew, who she was before, with Harper.
Yeah.
I haven't lost anybody. I'm just replacing with
Right.
the real version of you, who you really are, who my true friend has always been. And so then they go on to, let's see, it doesn't have to, oh, the last part of this, it was hard to me. So at the end, Harper, they go to California to a house that Harper has bought about 7 years prior, and for about like $10,000. And it was a house at the time she's beginning to really wrestle with her dysphoria, and she was considering just moving to this house, a place that was kind of isolated, so she could close the curtains and dress as a woman and be a woman within this space and close herself off from the world, but actually be able to be who she was. And there's a lot of sadness because this house is in disarray. It's been like there's graffiti painted, and I mean it looks like squalor, and you could just kind of see this I don't know, almost realization across Will about how hurt that he felt like his friend felt like she had to go to such a length
Right.
to isolate herself, to feel like she had a safe space where she could be who she really wanted to be. And he was like, and what are your plans for it now? And she was like, well, now that I have transitioned, I don't need this space anymore. And I'm thinking about passing it on to someone else. But that at the time, it had given her peace because it was a place that she could go and be who she was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she didn't want to have to close herself off to be accepted, to be authentic. She didn't. It was honestly, I believe it's probably the same understanding that anybody trans in this world or anybody who just doesn't feel accepted wants. We just want to be accepted as who we are, no matter what that is. But that was really, I think that was probably one of the harder parts for me to watch, because you could tell that even Harper seemed very unsure that when she bought the home, what exactly it was going to be for her. Like I don't necessarily felt like it was a safe space as much as maybe even her in prison.
Right.
Like, I mean, that's how it felt when she was talking to Will about it. That's what it felt like to me, that she kind of felt like this was a prison, like the only place she could be real.
Or just an
And
escape.
how sad
Yeah.
it was.
This isolation, this solitude, which isn't good for anybody, but to just get to be yourself, even if it means you're shut off from everybody, that's profound. That's profound that's how much it matters to each of us to be who we are. Seen a therapist, but I think I'm sorry, I'm having, oh, yeah. Sorry, I can't. I'm blind.
The glasses down with you. I'm with you. Because I'd be blind if I had the other ones on. I have two pairs. I have to switch far and close up because my kids laugh at me. Because I'll be working on the computer, watching TV, and I have to like put one. There are times where I have two stacked.
Yeah.
Kid
Yeah,
you.
and there's you think about how many resources so many people don't have or aren't able to access or don't for whatever reason. Being able to access therapy isn't something that anybody can do, let alone a trans person.
No.
You figure how hard it is to get into a therapist, first of all. Then you take the therapist pool and narrow it down to gender affirming therapists. There's not some giant pool of these people.
No. I mean, flat out. I mean, Harper sat right there and said her first one. And that wasn't just her own experience. Like, there were other people that they spoke with that had the same situation where they had kind of been pushed back about, no, this isn't how you feel. This is wrong. And like having her confidence to going shopping in public. I wonder if you've got some money that would be willing to go with you, a friend, to make it kind of a softer situation at first, right? To kind of ease it. Right.
But until then, wherever you got to get your clothes, baby, that's okay. That's okay.
Right. I mean, if you got to order online. Like, it comes to the house. I'm all about ordering to the house. Just shipping it back.
I dropped Amazon, so I don't know.
Well, no, I just meant going back to any store and turning it back around, because I'm not really doing Amazon anymore either. Tried a little. I gotcha. I mean, it's something you have to get comfortable. I think it takes time. I think was what Harper was kind of expressing there, that with Will coming out, being more public with her, being more willing to go in public places with her, made her feel more at ease doing things on her own. Because there was like 2 or 3 different occasions where Harper would get Will to drop her off at the door, and she would go in on her own with kind of this, I'm going to do this. Scary or not, I'm going to do this. And I do think there is, well, I think, and that goes back to what we were talking about before, Jenny, about there is a little bit of celebrity to this, right? That we talked about. That I think some people who watched it who felt like Harper got a better reception because of Will's celebrity status,
Yeah,
because
and
you had
that's
camera
true.
crews, right?
But that's kind of, that's the point. And could anybody else have made this documentary without that celebrity status, influence, resource? I don't know. But I
I don't
know
either.
he did what he could with what he had. And I can give him credit for that. No, it's not an authentic look, really. It would have happened had that not been a celebrity. But that's not Will Ferrell's fault. He can't not be a
No,
celebrity. He just is who he
right?
is. He did what he could with what he had.
Dragon, I've been keeping it secret since early teens, and I'm 40 now. And Dr. Diana, Dragon Rider, put up here, look up the support group Society for the Second Self, try S. Because there are online counseling services if you need counseling out there. And I think what you just said about, my train of thought just went other. So I got
Celebrity.
older, I thought it was a fetish. The celebrity. I think that has a lot to do with it, right? Like, I think people were kind of like, well, you got a better deal because you're also celebrity and you also have a little bit of status. And I think there is an important line to draw that this would not be the common trans person experience. I could not go in
Right.
with my son into places and expect to be received the way the two of them were.
Right.
It just wouldn't be the same. We don't have the same resources. It's as simple as that. We don't have the celebrity status. And I'm going to put this up
But
here since
because
Dr.
he
Diana provided.
does, and because his name is Will Ferrell, probably more people saw that movie. That movie made it somewhere. So, we got to stop. We're so into like digging on any part and these individual pieces of any movement and going, well, that person didn't do this right, or that person didn't do that right. Instead of, it matters all the time that as many voices get, that as much amplification gets to this, and humanization of humans, which is just a freaking bizarre thing to say.
Right.
As many eyes as can get on that, as much attention as can get on that, take it. Stop being mad that it was Will Ferrell who did it. Okay, well then you go do it. Go make a fucking documentary if you want. You didn't, so he did. And now that's accessible to people because it's on a major stream, the largest streaming platform.
And I think it's a big deal when you talk about somebody who's always been taken honestly for his jokes.
Yeah. Did something
and
so serious.
This isn't something that you joke about. This is a friend of his that he cares deeply for. The entire community cares deeply for Harper. Their whole SNL, you could tell how bonded they were. And I think people want to get so stuck in labels. For instance, what Dragon Rider put up here saying that thought it was a fetish, maybe. When you're trying to navigate that journey, I think it's important that you have somewhere that's a safe space for you to express everything you need to express, to figure that out for yourself and not be judged for it. And I hope, I would love to be that would be, and I think that was some of the not pushback, but that was some of the review as well from the movie or the documentary, was that while it was supposed to normalize trans people more within our public view, right, within social media, that in ways it was only going to be a blip, right?
Sure.
It would hit for a minute and then it was going to die down, and it wouldn't stay part of the conversation. Yeah. But I think whenever you're trying to bring something to light like this, that a lot of people want to bury in the dark, it takes some creativity, it takes trickling, and it takes time. And I don't like saying that, but it takes time. Look at what Will and Grace did for the queer community. Yeah. And I really say that because I was homophobic, transphobic, and I really started unpacking that crap when I started watching Will and Grace. And it wasn't abnormal anymore because I saw it. That was within my purview, and I came up in a town where that just wasn't there. You didn't see it.
We normalized it too much. There's too much acceptance, and that's a problem. So we need to put it back into the closet. We need to make it dark again.
No.
We don't see it because our children are becoming too accepting. people are changing their minds about what they initially thought, and that is not what they want. They want us to go back to
Majority of trans individuals start cross-dressing prior to pursuing their affirmation. And Dragon Rider have written right before that, I always thought they should make a genderless clothing store.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Like, I think for whether you're androgynous, non-binary, like, again, there are people who really are much more androgynous. I had a friend of mine in school who could have passed for either or and didn't care.
Right.
And again, like, our clothing a lot of times is over masculinized or over feminized to again put us in these categories. So I 100% feel
be a
that
good
with you.
blend, because I know lots of women who love hyper feminine clothing. I really don't. I love much more like androgynous, but every now and then, like, I want to feel like super feminine, but for the most part, I don't. That's just a style choice. I'm a cisgender woman. That really is just a fashion choice.
Right? Like, you won't see me, like, I can get dressed up, but
yeah,
you're more often to see me in sweats.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just, that's the way it is. Like, as casual people, I get things done. That whatever helps me get things done. It doesn't really matter how I show up. This is how I show up. What you see is what you get. Right? I didn't even notice that we both wearing black tonight. We
I know. I'm in mourning. I will probably just wear black every day for the next 4 years, and foreseeable future. Not ending in 4 years. Holy shit. We are over, and I do have a Zoom call.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. I play drums, and sometimes I'd show up for practice in a t-shirt and leggings, and my band never had an issue.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's experiment, explore, whatever makes you comfortable. That's what it is whatever makes you comfortable in your own skin.
Who doesn't love leggings? Leggings are the best.
Right? Oh my gosh, eat as much as you want.
I have like 20 pair.
As long as they're not too tight. I did have to like.
What? That's what leggings are.
Well, I have inflammation. I have inflammation issues. So there are times where leggings are a no-no because if I put them on, I swell up like instantly.
Oof.
So yeah, they can be great and they can be horrible. But Dragon Rider, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for being here.
Dr. Diana, Jeffrey, AP, and I feel like, was there one more? No, I think that's all that I can see anyway that are here. If there is anybody else here, I will get to you in the comments. And I'm sorry I've not been keeping up with comments recently, and I need to catch back up on comments. But I will be uploading this to TikTok later on. So if you see this later on, then know that Jenny and I are actually planning on going back on TikTok tonight, and we'll discuss other things and probably more of this.
Yeah, very cool.
Sounds good.
Love you. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.